you go.
Okay, we ready? Yeah. Fine. First of all, thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks to the Allegheny County Libertarians for hosting me tonight. It's good to be back here. It's been 12 years since I've been in these hallowed halls. But it's good to be back. Hallowed or hallowed? All right, what I'd like to do tonight is I'd like to, first of all, present my standard stump speech. It's about 10-15 minutes long. It's the same speech that I would give if I went to a PTA meeting or to a candidates forum or any group who says, Ken, stand up and talk for a couple minutes. So I'll give that, and then what I want to do is go into some details, talk libertarian to libertarian, how I see the rest of the year unfolding in terms of what the campaign's going to look like, not necessarily my campaign, but how I would like to see the rest of the year lay out. Sound good? All right, let me start at the beginning. My name is Ken Krawchuk. I'm running for the Libertarian Party's gubernatorial nomination this year. 60 years old, was born and raised in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia to be precise. My wife and I have been married 36 years now, and we have 3 daughters. And the kids like to pick on us because they say, you know, all of our friends' parents are divorced, second marriages. What's wrong with you guys? So I guess either I haven't worn her out yet, or she hasn't tired of me yet, one or the other. We also have 2 grandchildren so far. I keep telling the kids, grandkids, grandkids. Grandkids are great. Professionally, I'm an information technology professional. I've been running my own consulting firm since the 80s. I hold 3 United States patents related to database theory. So if there's any geeks in the audience, maybe after this kind of compare a couple of things. Also an author. Last year my first novel came out, Atlas Snubbed. It's a parody sequel to Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. I'm calling it my campaign platform novel because a lot of the ideas that I'm running on are presented in here as fiction. Most notably, the separation of society and state, which is one of my key points. So I'm a family man, businessman, inventor, author, but most importantly, I'm a libertarian. I've been a libertarian since 1993, and I ran for governor of Pennsylvania in 2002 against Ed Rendell and in 1998 against Tom Ridge. So I've been around the block a few times. It's important to know I'm a libertarian because we libertarians are different from the 2 old parties. We are the party of principle. That means every law we support and every law we oppose can all be traced back to one single idea. The idea that your life is yours, that your property is yours, that you have the God-given, inalienable right to live your life your way without interference, provided only that you respect the rights and property of your neighbor. That's it. That's what it means to be a libertarian. Your life, your way. It's the golden rule on a political level. And the public has reacted very positively to this message. Since our founding in 1971, we have grown to become the 3rd largest party, hands down, outnumbering all the other third parties put together. That's true not only in terms of registered voters, but also in terms of elected and appointed officials. Last number I saw, we have about 140, 150 elected libertarians nationwide, with about 40 of those right here in Pennsylvania. So about 25% of all elected libertarians are hopefully. Let's see, and again, that is outnumbering all the other third parties put together. I call this the 800-pound chihuahua of politics. So there's something about me, something about the party. Now, let me talk a little bit about what you can expect from a libertarian governor. Well, obviously, you've got to find somebody who's going to respect your right to live your life your way. Now, as I've been traveling the state, not just this time, but also in prior times, there's several issues that keep coming up. And what I'd like to do is touch on the top 3. First one, of course, is taxes. Who thinks taxes are too low? Well, can you hear me? Who? No, of course not. They're too high. Everybody knows they're high. Why are they high? Because spending is too high. Why is spending too high? Because they're spending your and my money on unconstitutional things, pork barrel things. They're glad handing it around to the voters just so they can get reelected. Well, it's gotten so bad lately, well, it's not even lately, that over the last 50 years, the size of government in Pennsylvania has been growing at more than 3.5 times the rate of inflation. It doesn't matter if a Republican is in there or a Democrat is in there. It doesn't matter if it's low inflation times or Jimmy Carter high inflation times. more than 3 times the rate of inflation. That means that $100 that we would pay to Pennsylvania in 1964, today is over $2,200. If that tracked with inflation, it should be about $600. So you can see that government is just galloping through the roof. When I'm governor, that trend will end. And it's something that I'm not going to need the help from the State House. There are things that I can do unilaterally. I have here my job description, Pennsylvania Constitution. And it gives all kinds of cool powers to the governor. And one of the big ones is the power of the veto. I promise I will veto every single tax increase while I'm governor. So that 3 times the rate of inflation, that trend will end. You know, let me say something funny. When I was running in 2002, I was standing up in front of people saying, for the last 40 years, government's been growing at more than 3 times the rate of inflation. And here I am 12 years later. For the last 50 years, some things never change. But it's not just the veto. The governor has the line item veto. That's the one where you can really do the most good. For example, that database of gun owners that they're not supposed to maintain that they do, I can just defund that. Same thing with the Milk Marketing Board. Any pork barrel, anything unconstitutional. And it's going to take a supermajority from the 2 houses to override my veto. I'm sure they're not going to always be able to do that. So we're going to be able to stop the increase in taxes. But I'm not going to stop there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a series of budgets over the 4 years of my term that's going to reduce the Pennsylvania personal income tax to 0. So not only are we going to hold the line on taxes, we're going to roll it back. And the way we roll it back is through the separation of society and state. And I'll talk about that a little more later. So that's issue number 1. Taxes. Too high, and they're going to go down. Issue number 2. Crime. I hear a lot about crime. In fact, today I was in Johnstown at the Democrat Tribune for an hour-and-a-half interview. And this featured prominently during that interview. He wanted to know what I was going to do with crime. They just had this big report out. And my answer, which is my standard answer, it exactly fit his question. Starts off with a study done by the Commonwealth Foundation in Harrisburg. It's a conservative think tank. They found that 95% of all crimes are committed by only 5% of the criminals. So by going back to my job description here, one of the powers of the governor is the power over parole. Day 1, I'm going to give orders to eliminate parole for violent criminals. I think it's crazy to let these guys out of prison, especially after we finally get them in jail through our convoluted criminal justice system. When I'm governor, they will serve every single day of their sentence. And since that 5% are the ones who are committing 95% of the crimes, we're guaranteed to reduce crime. Just common sense. I'm surprised nobody's done it so far. Now, a lot of times when I say it, people have said to me, oh, come on, Ken, what are you going to do? You're going to build new prisons? Prisons are already overcrowded. No. There's plenty of room. Because there are people right now in prison who don't belong there. I'm talking about pot smokers. There are lots of pot smokers. I've seen numbers all over the place, but it looks like the most recent number, and I just got this yesterday, it looks like almost 20% of the prisoners, and Pennsylvania prisoners, are there for drug offenses. That's a lot. Going back to my job description, I love this Constitution. One of the powers the governor has is the power of the pardon. Day 1, I promise I will pardon every single non-violent pot smoker, or drug offender in general. If they were sitting around watching The Simpsons, smoking a joint, got busted, maybe doing a line or something like that, they have a get-out-of-jail-free card from this governor. We have to do this because prisons are just too crowded. It's worse. I'm not sure about around here, but in Philadelphia, they have prison caps there. But these caps are so tight that they're throwing people out of jail. It's now reached the point where they're releasing murderers and rapists from our overcrowded prisons to make room for pot-smoking Grateful Dead fans. That's insane. So once I'm in, we're going to pardon these guys. Now, if they dealt drugs to kids, or if they were violent or stole from somebody, they're going to stay safely in jail. Other than that, they're free. And not just pot smokers or people caught up in the war on drugs. Suppose, for example, you didn't have some piece of paper that the government mandates that you have. For example, a carry permit. And you're thrown in jail because you didn't have a carry permit. That's the sort of person to be pardoned as well. As long as they're being responsible with their firearm, there's no reason for them to be in jail. So I'll be pardoning them and anyone else along those lines as well. In general, you could sum it up in 4 words. No victim, no crime. So any of these victimless crimes, all of them will be pardoned. So that's the 2 sides of the crime issue. Keep the hardened criminals in jail, let the honest guys out. We'll be able to close some of our prisons and reduce the size of the prisons right off the bat by about 20%. Good start. So that's the second issue. We did taxes, we did crime. And the third issue, some people say this should really be the first issue, education. Education in Pennsylvania is a mess, especially in Philadelphia. I'm not sure about internal Pittsburgh here. Is it bad?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I could have guessed that. Do you know why? Because 90-some% of all students in Pennsylvania go to the same school system, the government school system. It's a virtual monopoly. Like all monopolies, the costs are high, the choice is low, the quality is not really that good. What I would like to do is I would work to break that monopoly. And the best way to break up any monopoly is to introduce competition. Now, when I talk about competition, I'm coming at it from a different angle because I want to bring in somebody who's been ignored in the education debate for years. 2 people called the parents, remember them? I would like them to be involved in ending the monopoly. Specifically, what I would like to see is that they could choose any government school for their child, and the funding that would have gone to their local school would follow the child to the school of the parent's choice. So you see what happens. Good schools get more funding and grow. Poor schools lose their funding and are forced to close down. Now, when I say good and poor, I'm not talking about my opinion. I'm not talking about your opinion. I'm not talking about the opinion of the unelected Board of Education in Harrisburg. I'm not talking about some Common Core curriculum from outside the state. I'm talking about good and bad in the opinion of the only person who matters, the parents. They're the ones who will be deciding it. Now, of course, they'll have to pay for the transportation, so if somebody in Pittsburgh picks a school in Philadelphia, they're going to have to drive the kid back and forth every day. The taxpayers are not going to cover that. So for the same tax dollar, we're guaranteed to improve education for our kids. And that's really what it's all about. That's another thing that I get beaten up for. Some people are just going to say, oh, you're going to close my local school, huh? Well, no and yes. Because if everybody's sending their kids over to this good school, they're not all going to fit. So what they can do is they can come over here and take over this failed school. And whatever the techniques are that they're using that parents like, they can employ those same techniques here, reopen this school now as a good school, so it's going to improve the inner city schools, especially in Philadelphia, and it sounds like Pittsburgh here as well. And that's using the same dollars we're spending today to get improved education. Again, it's a simple idea. I don't know why anybody else hasn't come up with it yet. I guess politicians like to have the grasp of the power for themselves. Now that's my mainstream idea. I also have 2 other ideas for education. I call them low, medium, and high. That first one was low. With medium, we can cut property taxes in half. And with high, we can eliminate property taxes. Let me talk about the medium right now. Last month, I sat down at the keyboard. I live in Abington Township, just north of Philadelphia. So I looked for private schools around Abington to see how much they charge per year. And I was getting numbers 10,000, 8,000, 15,000. Friend schools was over 20,000, Germantown Academy, places like that. If you ignore the exclusive schools, just take the middle bunch. The average cost of 1 year of education is about $9,000. And that includes other Catholic schools that go all the way down to about $2,000. Then I took the Abington School District budget, the government school, and I divided it by the number of students. Guess how much it costs to educate one child in Abington Township? Sorry? 50? Oh man, no, it's not that much. $18,000. $9,000 is the average of the private schools, over $18,000 for the government school. If the school board, instead of running their Taj Mahals, if instead they placed the students in the local private schools, we could cut property taxes in half overnight. Plus, we wouldn't have all the problems with these Taj Mahals. If you wanted a school where they said the Pledge of Allegiance, send the kid to one. If you want to know where they didn't, send them to a different one. Parents would be involved in the selection of the school as well. So that's medium. High. High is one of the best. I call it the great offer. Simply put, if you pay for your own child's education, you'll never have to pay property tax again. Because that's where virtually all the property tax goes, is for education. Now, yes, it's expensive. We just found out it's about $9,000 a year in suburban Philadelphia to educate your kid. So if you want to educate your kid, you may have to take out a second mortgage. But consider the alternative. Right now with property tax, you're paying that $18,000 bill this year, next year, 10 years from now, when you're 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, you're paying it forever. But if you pay for it yourself, if you took out a second mortgage, after a number of years, you'd be done. You'd be gone. And you could live out your golden years without property tax. Now, obviously, when I tell this to senior citizens, they love it because they're not paying, they wouldn't have to pay for a service that they're not using directly. I tell couples who have children in private school, they love it because they're already paying twice. Once in their taxes and once to their private school. Childless couples love it for the same reasons that seniors love it. Again, it's a service they don't use directly. But even couples who have children like the idea. Not only because they're not going to have to pay property tax in their golden years, but also because they're going to get a better education for their kids because they're going to a private school, one that aligns with the parents' values. So it's a win-win-win-win situation. The students win as well. So there are the three approaches, low, medium, and high. Low, where we improve education using the same dollars. Medium, where we improve education and cut property taxes in half. And high, where we eliminate property taxes and still improve education. Now, they're the top three issues. There are a lot of issues. When we get to Q&A, if you have a favorite, we can talk about it. But I would just suggest stop out on my website, kenk.org, kenk.org. It's simple enough to remember. And there's a whole bunch there, and I'm putting more out there all the time. Now, one thing that I hear, and I heard this last time I ran, and I'm hearing it again this time already, they say, Ken, I love the idea. We should get pot smokers out of jail. We should lock up the violent criminals. We should reform education. We should cut taxes, all these things, but Ken, you're real. You'll never win. Wait a minute. I can win. Because of the antics of the Democrats and the Republicans. They have alienated so many voters that in a typical gubernatorial election, you only get 35% turnout, 38% turnout, right in around there. If you crunch the numbers and take a look at what it takes for victory, all you need is to get the vote of 1 out of 8 voting-age Pennsylvanians. 1 out of 8. Actually, it's closer to 1 out of 9. I could say 1 out of 9, but I know there's going to be some wiseacre in the audience who's going to say, it's 1 out of 8.83. Yeah. 1 out of 8 is all it takes. So how many people we got in this room? It's like, I don't know, 20 people? 16? The point is, if I'm talking to an audience this big, and all of you are like, Ken, you're full of it, go away. But 2 of you are sitting there going, this makes sense. I'm going to help get this guy elected. That's all it takes. 1 out of 8. So that's what we're going to be doing, aiming to focus on that 1 out of 8. We're going to tell them the same story, that if they keep on voting the way they've been voting, they're going to keep on getting just what they've been getting. And I don't know about you, but I have. Now at this point, I usually stop and open it up for Q&A. Because that's the end of my typical stump speech. But what I'd like to do for a moment is just talk, as I mentioned, libertarian to libertarian. How the rest of this year is going to unfold. I've broken it down into 3 areas. There's the pre-nomination, which is what we're in right now, and that's going to end on February 22nd, Saturday, in Bethlehem, when we have our state convention and we choose our governor and lieutenant governor candidates. Now, we libertarians don't have a primary. We don't insist that the taxpayers pay for our candidate selection process. We pay for our own, which is the only way it should be, of course. And that'll happen on the 22nd. During that time, I'm visiting as many libertarian groups as possible. I think it's just the 10th one. I'm losing count. There's just so many of them. It's a lot of fun. I'm having a good time. But I'm here to let you know what the plan is for the year and what your role in it is going to be. And also, if you think that I'd be a good enough candidate, maybe you'll show up at the convention and support me. I would appreciate that. But that's what part one is. While I'm here, though, it's not just about me. It's also about you. Because we need as many candidates as possible. This year, the only races that there are governor and lieutenant governor, statewide, then the higher level ones, Congress, state senate, state representative. And that's it. There are no school boards, there are no municipal elections, no judge elections or anything like that. Only those top 5 slots. Top 5. So what I'm looking for is people who be willing to run for office. It's always a quiet moment after that. People to run for state rep. What my goal is to see if we can populate half of the state representative slots. Half of it. It's never been done by a third party in Pennsylvania. On the national level, we did it back in 2000, where we had half of the congressional seats. A libertarian was running for one of those seats. And I'm proud to say that I was one of those libertarians. We made history that day. I want to do that in Pennsylvania. So I'm looking to get as many state rep candidates as possible. Now, if you just want to get your name on the ballot, and then just, well, I'll leave it at that for the moment. Think about it for just a minute. We get the big picture, then I'll come back to that. Phase 1 is the pre-nomination process, where we are now, finding our candidates. Phase 2 begins with the convention, when we select our candidates, and runs through August 1st, which is our petition drive, and we have to collect signatures. Now, this year, I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's actually not too bad. For those of you who know, there's a complicated formula which dictates how many signatures a third-party candidate has to get. It has been as high as 67,000 signatures. When I ran in 2002, it was 21,028. Tom Corbett, he needs 2,000. Ed Grandel back then, he only needed 2,000. I needed 21,000. This year, the number is 16,639. Only 16,639. Even though the Constitution says all elections shall be equal. Because some people are more equal than others. Fortunately, we have until August 1st to collect those signatures. March 12th is the first day to collect signatures, just right after our convention, make sure we have our paperwork in order. And then we have, whatever that is, 5 months to collect all the signatures that we need. Now, I've done this before, and I'm telling you there's an easier way to do it than to collect those 16,000 signatures. Because we really need about 30,000 to make sure we can withstand a challenge. And the best way to do that is to get them all on one day. The best possible day to collect signatures, and that's primary day. I did this in 1994, my first race for state representative. There's me and a handful of buddies, put them at the busiest polling places in Allegheny Township. By the time the day was over, we collected over 1,000 signatures. Less than a dozen of us, fewer than a dozen of us, I should say. What I'm going to do is take that idea statewide. That's one of the reasons why I'm looking for state rep candidates. For state rep, it's about 300 signatures, 400 sometimes. It's one of the more reasonable numbers because the 2 old parties need 300. Most libertarians would need 300. Could be 400, depends upon that formula. So if you're a state rep candidate, you can get 5 or 6 of your buddies and stand at the polling place on primary day and catch people as they come out the door. Not when they go in, because everybody's handing them stuff on the way in. Catch them on the way out. Say, excuse me, would you like to support democracy in your neighborhood? And sign a petition to get the Libertarian Party candidates on the ballot. Doesn't commit you to anything, it just gets their name on the ballot. In my experience, about 1/3 of the people sign. So we go to a busy polling place, and there's 1,000 people who come to that polling place. If you're there all day, you're going to walk away with 300 signatures. So it's pretty easy to do. That's why I want to populate half of the state house seats. There are, what, 203 of them? If we get 103, it would be a little more than half. 102 would be half. If we get 102 candidates, and each of them gets 600 signatures, double their minimum, we're over 60,000 signatures. We'll be challenge proof. And then, that's the second part. Oh, I forgot to mention the key date. It's May 20th. May 20th is primary day. That's one of the main reasons I'm here tonight. The first one is to find out who wants to run for state rep. The second one is so that you go to your boss and you tell him, I'm not going to be in work on Tuesday, May 20th, because you're going to be at the polls getting these signatures to get yourself and your buddies on the ballot. And that's important because of the third part of the race. Once you're on the ballot, something really cool happens. Who's run for public office before? Wow, several of you. You know what happens the minute you're on the ballot? All of a sudden, people start sending you questionnaires. Reporters call you on the phone. They ask questions. They write down the answers. They print them. They invite you to debates, candidates debates. I've already been invited to 2 debates for pre-primary debates, even though I don't have the nomination yet. I'm getting questionnaires now, so the fun's already starting for me. But it starts heavy duty in that third part once you're on the ballot. When I ran in 2002, I was invited to 4 major debates with all the candidates. 2 of them were broadcast nationally. In fact, the San Francisco Chronicle picked up on my race after the first one. They loved one of my sound bites. The question was on same-sex benefits or something like that. And I said, well, what's good for the goose and the gander is good for the goose and the goose and the gander and the gander. And after that, they were my buddy-buddy. So that's the third part of the race, the fun part. This is what we're aiming at, because it's all free media. I was at the Montgomery County Candidates Forum. This is last Tuesday. Sitting in the front row was one of our biggest activists, Obie Mile. She served 16 years as a judge of elections as a libertarian. She's our longest serving libertarian. She came into the party when she saw me on TV way back when. This is the kind of thing that you get once you're on the ballot as a libertarian. And when I ask people to run, people are like, yeah, I can get signatures. Yeah, I can answer those surveys, but don't put me in front of a crowd. I can't be in front of a crowd. You can. You could be in front of a crowd. I used to be scared to death to speak in public. You know what cured me?
Toastmasters.
Absolutely. Toastmasters. Who knows about Toastmasters? Half of you. Good. The mission of Toastmasters is to provide a supportive environment for learning public speaking and leadership skills. I've been a Toastmaster for a little over 16 years now. I used to be scared to death to speak in public. I remember once I went to a town hall meeting with a congressman. I was a Democrat back then. And I wanted to ask him about the space program. I'm a big space buff. I started to ask him the question, and I had an asthma attack before it was through. I was just so nervous. I couldn't do it. With Toastmasters, we typically meet twice a month, and you practice. Every meeting's the same. You get up, and you give a speech. Some are impromptu, some are prepared. In the second half of the meeting are evaluations of those speeches. So you get immediate feedback. You get constant practice. After about 5 or 6 months, you won't recognize yourself. It took me about a year and a half to get over my fright of being on stage. Now, I can talk on national television, audience of thousands, just as readily as I'm talking here. Toastmasters changed my life. Gave me the ability to communicate. We libertarians have the best message on the planet, liberty. But that message is useless if we can't communicate. So that's the third reason why I'm here. To please cajole you, urge you to join Toastmasters. There's nothing better you can do for the libertarian liberty movement than to join Toastmasters. So there are the 3 things. I'm looking for candidates, even if you've run before. I'm looking for you to take off on May 20th. Be sure to let your boss know. And I'm looking for you to join Toastmasters. Easy to find a club. Go to toastmasters.org, key in your zip code, and they'll tell you all the clubs in the area. And I don't know, you're in a different district here, so I'm not exactly sure about Pittsburgh, but I would bet you there's at least 20 to 40 clubs within 10 miles of where we're standing. they're all pretty much the same. So I think that's it. Let me just do a quick mental review. Yeah, I guess that's it. They're the three main things that I wanted to mention to you. I have a sign-up sheet. If you would like to volunteer for my campaign to help out, I'd ask you to please put down your name, phone, email address, and area of expertise. If you're good with social media, which I'm not, that's why I need help, let me know. Rich Lothar was my treasurer in 2002. I have a treasurer, but she's on a world cruise right now, so I need an interim treasurer. Nudge, nudge. And there's all sorts of other slots that are still open. And it could be simple things, just like doing research. For example, that number, 17% of all prisoners in Pennsylvania are drug people. I just got that from one of my volunteers. I asked them, just throw it out on a list. I have a list of volunteers. Somebody please answer me this question. And they did. So there that is. Let me pass around my card. Please, everyone take one. I have more if that's not enough. So if you have any questions, please feel free to get a hold of me. But that's for the future. Right now, that's about all I have to say. I'd like to open up the floor to questions on any subject. Yes, Greg?
Question about publicly funded busing for schools. We fortunately, my wife and I live in Mount Lebanon, and they have no busing except for disabled students.
Right.
And I'm told, I can't verify the number, that it's a third of the typical school district budget goes towards busing.
Really?
So that we have an enormous advantage in Mount Lebanon of diverting resources that would have gone a third to busing all towards education, or almost all, disabled busing being much smaller. What's your attitude towards public funding of busing for the school system?
Well, I always go back to my job description. And it does say, unfortunately, I don't agree with it that it should be there, but it says that the Commonwealth should run a thorough and efficient means of public education. It does not say that they should drive them back and forth. But the argument has been made that it has been necessary. In fact, they actually provide that for sectarian schools, when the Constitution says no money is allowed to be spent on sectarian schools. They pay for their busing and for their books. Now, I didn't know that that came out of the local school district's budget. I thought that was supplied by Harrisburg.
That wasn't the impression I got, but I don't know authority on the subject.
And you know, I don't know for sure either. But
good research question for a volunteer.
that's right. And you know, that's one of the reasons why I come out here is to practice my speech, practice getting questions. It's rare that I get a question that I can't answer. And that's a good example. You get a gold star, sorry. Yes, Rich.
Back to education. I proposed before that some people don't have kids, but they still want to help kids get educated. I would propose that for anybody who wants to help somebody else's kid get educated, for every dollar they pay for somebody's tuition, they get a $1 tax credit on their state income tax.
I used to hold similar opinions back in the 90s.
Okay.
Until somebody pointed out to me, aren't you using the tax code to do a little social engineering? Aren't you now complicating the tax code a little more? And I thought, that's right. I would like to simplify the tax code. The best way to simplify it is to eliminate it.
Yeah.
But to put in special little things,
Okay.
it's a thought. But I have another approach.
Okay.
And it comes back to separation of society and state. Let me just discuss that briefly. I said I was going to come back to it. Right now, one of the reasons why it costs so much in taxes is because the government is glad handing your money to all the different special interest groups. Whether it's education or prisoners' rights or I don't care who, milk marketing board, farmers, doesn't matter. What we need to do is identify all these different expenses and eliminate them. The way to eliminate them is to separate society and state. The reason why things are so expensive is because they're spending money on things they shouldn't be spending on. I mentioned this before. They've got their welfare programs, they've got unconstitutional programs, they've got pork barrel programs, all these different things. So, I'm having trouble coming at the thought here. What we need to do is change how we fund those different programs. And the way to change that is to separate the society and state. Now, why am I having so much trouble with this? This isn't good.
So do you know about the Pittsburgh Promise?
I've never heard of Pittsburgh.
Okay, so it's a scheme or a program or whatever. The idea is to encourage Pittsburgh public school students to graduate from high school by guaranteeing them a scholarship towards college.
Who pays for that?
That's right. So actually, like, the lead donations are from local foundations. So this is a way to separate out that function, to run a program like that without having it come out of taxpayer funds. It's like, it's not fictional that things like that could be done.
Well, the way I would do it is I would separate society and state. Most of the things that Pennsylvania is spending money on now, I was just chronicling several of them, it's gotten to the point now where that constitutes 80% of the state budget. 80% of the state budget are giveaway programs. Federal budget, it's 60% and growing. Now, as an example, let me give you the federal numbers because they're a lot more telling. Pennsylvania has to have a balanced budget. So let me start with federal and I'll come back to Pennsylvania. Right now, the federal budget is about $3.5 trillion, maybe a little, roughly, maybe another point or two up or down. Federal income is $2.3 trillion. That next has $1.2 trillion we borrow. But the cost of the welfare state on the federal level is $2.2 trillion. With $2.3 trillion of revenue, that means that virtually every dollar that comes into the federal government is going right out the door on giveaway programs, whether it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, all those different things. All the rest of the money is borrowed. So that means the cost of defense is borrowed. Amtrak, NASA, the Export-Import Bank, foreign embassies, the White House, everything, the cost of government is all borrowed money. And that number is growing. It's growing all the time. So it's 60% on the federal side, 80% on the state side. That's one of the reasons why the state budget has been growing at more than 3 times the rate of inflation, because these giveaway programs keep growing and growing and growing.
I'm sorry.
Okay. My proposal is to take all of those programs which properly belong to society, taking care of the sick, drugs for the seniors, education, and physically move them out of government into a separate organization that I call society. Now, society will look just like government. So at the national level, there'll be a president of society and a Congress of society. On the state level, there'll be a governor of society, plus the state representatives and state senators of society. Locally, there would be a mayor of society and a town council of society. You get the general idea. So society would look exactly like government does, but there would be one key difference. Society would not have the coercive power of taxation, or any coercive power for that matter. So that way, they could pass a PACE program that gives drugs to seniors, but they couldn't garnish your wages to pay for it. They would instead have to rely on voluntary contributions, telecoms, bake sales. They could pass whatever kind of giveaway programs they like. Now, when they pass something, I don't call them laws because they don't have the power of laws. They don't have any coercive powers, remember. I call them guidelines. So the guideline is, we would like to give seniors drugs. Here's how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost us $100 million a year. There are 10 million people in Pennsylvania, 12 million, I'm trying to keep the math easy. 10 million people, divided out, that comes out to $10 a person. So society would ask you to please contribute $10 in order to fund these voluntary programs. Now I know everybody's not going to contribute. Let's say 1 in 10 contributes. So your share, and we would know that in advance when we set the budget, so your share we'd ask you for $100. And if society couldn't come up with all the money they needed, they would have to tighten their belts. They would have to prioritize. So what that would do is that would put a stop on runaway spending. Instead of these numbers galloping at 3.5 times the rate of inflation, if we couldn't afford it, we have to start to prioritize. And we do that by separating society and state. And that's what the novel is about. It shows a working example of how to set up a separate society, what the society would do, what kind of obstacles they run across, and how they overcome them. So, that comes back to your question, saying that you wanted to have a tax break so that people who wanted to contribute to somebody else's education could do so. Society would be that vehicle. It would be the vehicle for all the kind-hearted people who want, excuse me, who want to have a say, who want to contribute, want to help, without having to hold a gun to everybody else's head. So I can see people like Sally Struthers, who want to become president of society. Maybe Jerry Lewis would be her chief of war or whatever. But that way, people would donate. And we could start offloading all of these societal programs away from the state. Now, we as libertarians, we know that the purpose of the state is to protect the rights and property of the citizens. Everything beyond that is properly a societal function. So let's separate society and state, move it over to where it belongs. I've been looking for an alternative to this, but I haven't found it. It's been over 10 years that I've been working on this book, and I haven't found another alternative. Things like sequestration, it's not going to work. If you know the details of that, that didn't cut anything. It only reduced the size of the growth of government. Government is still bigger. We're headed for a fiscal cliff, not just on the federal level, but also on the state level. That's why our taxes are getting so high. We've got to do something. I have not seen any other plan which attacks the heart of the problem. Yeah, we can cut 10% off the military. Yeah, we can eliminate some fraud and waste. But it's not going to change the fact that the cost of the welfare state is galloping far faster than we can possibly pay for it. So my solution is the separation of society and state. Long answer, my apologies, especially for the rough beginner. I'm a Toastmaster, I should be able to do better than that. Yes?
This is an ignorant question. What sort of control over the state police do you have?
Well, as governor, you do command the state police.
So can you pull them off of us? Can you command them to leave us alone?
Yes and no. You can, but you have to be careful how you do it. For example, when Ed Rendell was mayor of Philadelphia, he ordered the police chief not to pursue minor marijuana crimes. So if the police saw somebody blowing off a joint, the police didn't bother. Now he did that by setting the police's priorities. Because if you refuse to execute one of the laws, you could be thrown out of office for dereliction of duty. So you can do it, but you can't just say, well, I'm not going to enforce that law. You have to set things up a certain way. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is you have to be careful.
Could you just tell them to stay home?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I didn't hear you.
Could you just tell them to stay home?
I guess I could, but you wouldn't want to do that. I mean, the police have a valid role. Then they get the bad guys off the street for us. I went through the Abington Township Citizens Police Academy last year. I guess it's 2 years ago now. And I learned that half of what police do related to traffic issues. They keep traffic flowing, they write tickets, they're there to clean up after accidents. Half of police work is traffic stuff. Yes, sir.
So more on the book. Well, when did it come out? Who published it? How's it selling? How much does it cost? Is it on Amazon? Things like that.
Yes. It came out last February 14th. And yes, it's on Amazon. You can get it for Nook, Kindle, Apple, hard copy. The best place to get it is through the publisher's website, and that is atlassnug.com. Easy enough. And if you go to my campaign site, there's a direct link to it, one to the other. The electronic versions are $10. Printed version is, this is $20. And there's also a director's cut version, which is twice as thick. It's the book I wrote. This is the book that got published, because people don't want fat books, even though it is a parody sequel to Atlas Shrugged, which is a fat book in its own right. But the printed copy costs a lot to print the fat one. That's $35. It's $20 for the smaller, $35 for the bigger one, and the electronic copies are $10 and $20 respectively. But the best place to get it is through atlassnug.com. But you can go to Amazon, All the reviews on Amazon are all 4- and 5-star reviews. I'm still waiting for a bad review. In the last year, I've sold hundreds, not thousands. When I'm out there pushing it, like for example, I was up at the Liberty Forum in New Hampshire last February, and there was a nice big bump for that. And anytime I do a signing, there's a bump, and it takes a while to trail off. So now there's a bump going on again. Since I announced my candidacy, things have tripled, which is good. But I'm trying to get that idea of the separation of society and state out there. Yes, sir.
What pisses people off so much that 1 in 8 voters cross their party line and go to vote for a libertarian?
I usually find it's something personal. A buddy of theirs got popped for pot, or maybe they did, or maybe the PA Department of Revenue came after them. It's when it becomes personal that fires people up. That's the thing that does it the most. That's what happened to me. When I opened up my own company back in the late 80s, I could not believe the nonsense that I faced. People were using the power of government to hold me down. So that's when I started looking around, and it took me about 2 or 3 years when I finally found the Libertarian Party. And the rest, as they say, is history. So that's one thing. The other thing to do is catch them young. Now in 2002, more than half of my appearances were at schools. Mostly colleges and high schools, but I went as low as the 3rd grade. And that was a trip, because the kids, the questions they asked were just so cute. They're like, does it hurt your feelings when the other candidates beat up on you? Things like that. Can I get some money? It's a lot of fun. Well, what you do is you're planting the seeds of liberty in the younger generation. I got an email just a couple days ago from somebody who heard I was running. He said, you don't know me, but I was in the audience at such and such a school. You introduced me to libertarian principles, and now I'm a diehard libertarian. When I heard Ron Paul come on the scene, I was helping him in his campaign. Now I'm over 18, I can vote, I'm going to be voting for you. So these are the sorts of things that work the best. Catch them young. I have already begun doing the school service. I've got volunteers lining up school visits for them. And let me tell you, I hereby empower all of you with whatever ridiculous power I might have or might not have. Contact schools and say, hey, I know the Libertarian Party's gubernatorial candidate. He'd like to come in and address your school. Maybe a political science class, or if you're having a democracy day or something like that. Can we set something up? Relying on you people to do that. That's one of the best things to do, because the young people are the ones with the energy. They're the ones with the time. They're the ones who know how to use all these little devices, not like me, where I got to ask for help about using Facebook or something like that. They're the ones who come in under the radar. Look what they did for Ron Paul. God bless Ron Paul. I'm telling you, for the things he did for the libertarian movement, I just saw some statistics showing the average age of the Pennsylvania Libertarian Party is now approaching 30. It's coming down. A couple years ago, it was up over 40. That's because all these new libertarians are coming out of the schools. So, that's the thing to do. And the third one, which doesn't work as often, but it works just as well, is to show people individually what's in it for them. In Toastmasters, we call that tuning into the radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me? So that always works. So when you tell people you're going to reduce their property taxes, improve education, eliminate crime, people jump on board with that. But that's not as effective. The most effective thing is when you're touched personally. Like when my brother came down with cancer. He survived, they cured him, hallelujah. But the doctor said, the best thing you can do to get over the sickness of chemotherapy is go out on the corner and buy yourself some pot. Drug laws made my sick brother a criminal. Give me a break. See, that's a sort of personal thing that fires people up. That's a good question. That's a great strategy question. And let me open it up to the rest of you. What else do you see that gets people fired up to come to the Libertarian Party? Anybody have any ideas?
Empirically coming to see you.
That's right. There you go. You're right. Candidates. When you have candidates, that fires up a county party. Because people like to come to see the candidates, they get behind the candidates. I was up in Schuylkill County. They elected a guy to town council. You should see that. Those guys are swaggering like they're king of the hill. We got our man in. We got him in, and they said it would never happen. Victory is great. I was just in Bucks County a couple days ago. They elected 6 people. You should have heard them. So yeah, good point. Thank you, Dave. Candidates fire up the county. Yes.
Earlier you said no victim, no crime. Does that mean you would repeal traffic violations?
Traffic violations?
Like
Well,
speeding?
well, that depends upon whether or not there was actually a crime there. Traffic laws are something that I would move over to society, because you're actually setting standards there. So what you do is provide guidelines. Now, as long as you're driving responsibly, there's really nothing that you should be hassled
Who
about.
defines responsible?
Well, some things are obviously irresponsible. Like if you're driving 90 miles an hour in front of a school with kids there, that's irresponsible. Now and the way that I approach it in my novel, they have exactly that situation where somebody's driving irresponsibly, and it's a post-apocalyptic world. So there's no government going on, and they're feeling their way by building these things up. And they're thinking, what can we do with this girl who's driving like a maniac? And somebody says, well, let's reinstitute driver's licenses. That way we can take it away from her. And the other character argued saying, yeah, but you're persecuting all these honest drivers just because of one bad apple. So what they do instead is they set up a can't drive license, even though it sounds oxymoronic. If you demonstrate that you can't drive in a reasonable manner, then you get a can't drive license. And if you're caught driving, throw you in jail for a couple of days to teach you a lesson. Now, we already said that somebody 90 miles an hour in front of a school with kids in recess, that's unreasonable. If you're right in the middle there, that's for a court to decide whether or not it's reasonable or unreasonable. So there still would be traffic violations, but only if you're being a real idiot about it.
It's like paradox that you said that you're not a society to have the ability to compel others. At the same time, you said society would set it.
No, there's two different things. Society would set the standards, and the courts still belong to the state. So if you're driving in front of the school going back and forth, now at that point the state can move in and they would sentence you to a can't drive license or whatever it may be. And there are other kinds of can't licenses. Instead of having a carry permit, you have a can't carry permit. And so it would be assumed that you know how to handle a gun, that you're responsible for the gun, but if you prove that you're not, well, that's when you get your can't carry permit. And if somebody is fracking and messing up the environment, you have a can't frack license, or whatever it may be. And if you catch them fracking, throw them in jail for a little bit, teach them a lesson. If they do it again, throw them in jail a little bit longer. Did that? Just want to make sure that cleared up the contradiction. Thank you. Yes.
So, I think one of the reasons why our spending is out of control is the way criminal justice is handled. If you were elected, how would you,
I'm sorry, what is handled?
how criminal justice is handled? Do you think that privatizing the prison system is a valid way to control spending in that area?
Well, I think we should reduce the number of prisoners in there. And then, a lot of prisons are already privatized. And that does give you some savings, and I certainly would be in favor of doing that. Just, I would gather it's going to be a better deal. Anything the government runs is just too expensive, costs are way too high on it. But when you say criminal justice system, I mean, that's pretty big. And it's also a different branch of government than what I'm running for, so there's really not much I can do in that area. I'm against the mandatory sentences, mandatory minimums and things like that. I think they're all bad ideas. But as governor, I can't really tell a judge how to run his side of the government. And then that brings up an even broader question of, are prisons effective? And they're not. We know they're not. Especially if you're taking an honest kid who was watching The Simpsons smoking a joint and you put him in a place like that. You know, he's going to come out not as good as he was before. But that's a whole other question. I don't have a complete answer to that. Yeah, David.
Have you set any goals that you want to talk about for sort of achievements for this campaign? You want to be on TV in every county. You want to raise and spend more than Obama did?
Nope. Nope. No. People who are in sales like to do that. They'll set a goal and they'll aim for it as hard as they can. I don't do that. I'm more of a strategist. What I do is I see the lay of the land and say, how can I best capitalize upon this situation? And I can give you a lot of examples. Like, for example, in what we do in Montgomery County, our Libertarian group there, we saw that the locals were doing a gun buyback, the local police. What we did is we set up our own booth in front of the police, doing our own buyback. We got the local gun dealers to send a couple of representatives, because the cops are paying $50 a gun. A lot of these guns worth more than $50. So we had a guy up, oh, I'll give you $300 for this. He'll give you $50. So we wound up buying back the guns from them. And that way, because the cops were melting them down, we were putting back into circulation again. So that was one thing. The other was we found out the location of the DUI checkpoints, the location and time. So what we did is we set up protests on either end. Warning, checkpoint ahead. We know that they did not get a single person until for the first 3 hours, which is when we started reducing our presence there. So for 3 hours, we prevented people from getting arrested with suspicion of checkpoints. So whenever you find out something's going on, that's what you jump on. So it's not so much saying, well, we're going to stop 25 DUI checkpoints this year. It's like, no. We're going to find out everything that we can, and then specifically aim for that. In Abington Township, they stole an old lady's house in eminent domain. We said, hey, what an issue. We held a roving demonstration in front of each of the 8 commissioners who voted in favor of stealing their property. In front of their houses, their neighbors are wondering what's going on. So when you're handed something, you go for it. The only goal that I have for this race this year is to make sure that we get party status. And in order to do that, I need to get 2% of the highest vote getter in the race. I did it in 2002, and then I broke my own record. I got 41,000 votes, which is the highest in Pennsylvania history for the governor's office, which broke my own record of 33,000 back in 1998. So with all the Ron Paul people, I think I'll break that again. So that's the only goal that I have. You put a suggestion on?
Yeah, so I mean, so to turn your campaign against you, in a sense, so you believe that society should operate by, constructing a budget and figuring out how many people are likely to kick in and telling people what their share is and hoping that they'll contribute. So why not that model for your campaign? Figure out how much money, right? How many libertarians there are in the state, tell people what their share is.
Because I don't want to sell myself short. Because if you set a goal, when you hit the goal, like, hey, you hit the goal, I can relax. No. I want to get more commercials. I ran over 300 commercials in 2002. I would be able to do more than that. But I'm not going to set the goal because I'm not sure what the cost is. Not yet. I know what it was 12 years ago, but I couldn't say now. I'm just going to go for as much as I possibly can with all the tools that I have. Again, it's a strategic approach, not a sales approach.
How's it look in the, within the Libertarian Party? The other candidates for governor, who's lieutenant governor candidates, how many have we ever run as far as state reps? Some of the lay of the land in your pre-camp, this effort.
Okay, let me answer your last question first because it's an easy answer. I think it's about a dozen. It's the most state rep candidates we run in 1 year. Henry, back up that number?
I think it's probably a little more than a dozen.
Less than 20?
Less than 20.
Yeah, not that many. So 100 would be impressive, yes. Now, as for this year, the candidates, I know of 2 other people who are seeking the gubernatorial nomination. One of them is a comedian from Philadelphia. His name is Steve Miller. That's really his name. And he was our candidate for the Court of Common Pleas in Philadelphia in this last election. He did virtually no campaigning. He got into a special election in September. They put his name on the ballot. So he had really no time at all. And he's been, for about a year or so now, he's been talking about running for governor. And in fact, he and I have had some lengthy discussions about how to approach it, about how to use pardons, parole, things like that, constitutional issues and everything. He's done no campaigning yet. And his goal is more to make fun of the system. than it is to become a governor candidate. When he was running for common police court, his platform was 2 words: not guilty. If he came before, he was going to say not guilty. It doesn't matter what it was. That's all he was going to say. So that's the approach he's doing. I don't think that enough libertarians are going to treat him seriously, because he's not treating himself seriously, in my opinion. It's up to you guys. The other guy, his name is Jonathan Jewell. He's from Northeast Philadelphia. He's a real estate guy. And he's a real straight shooter, good-looking guy, good talker. Not a Toastmaster, but yeah, it's easy to fix. He came to our Montgomery County gubernatorial candidates forum. Steve Miller could not make it. Steve tried, but he couldn't. But Jonathan got up there and he spoke for about 15 minutes. He was seeking our nomination because he found out that we haven't run a governor candidate in years. In fact, I stand here as the last governor candidate for any party outside of the 2 old parties. There's been no independent, no Libertarian, no Constitution, no Green, nobody. Nobody else has run for governor since I ran for governor because of our ballot access laws. He saw that, he said, well, they don't have any candidates. I'm going to run. And we said, do you know why we didn't have candidates? Because we've been thrown off the ballot, intimidated off the ballot. Dude, I didn't bring a letter. We have this letter from the Republicans asking us to withdraw in 2010, threatening us with a $100,000 fine for each of our candidates if we didn't do it. Of course, everybody withdrew, but he was not familiar with our platform or our situation with getting kicked off the ballot. In terms of the platform, he's not a heavy-duty libertarian. Certainly not a purist. He's more middle of the road. If I were governor, I'd be able to fix things. He wants a jobs program. We need more jobs. I asked him, he said, where does it say in here that you do a jobs program? He said, I don't know. Have you read this? No. Here. So he's kind of new. He's never run for public office before. So it's going to be up to the delegates at the convention to decide who it's going to be. There is going to be another gubernatorial candidates forum at the state party meeting on January 25th. That would be in Harrisburg, at the Harrisburg Hilton, and it's going to be streamed live, so you'll be able to catch it. And if you want to see what Jonathan said at the Montgomery County forum, I have video of it. I have video of every one of my appearances so far. I'm back at 100%. Every time I've stood up in public talking about the governor campaign, I have video of it. So if you go out to kenk.org, go out to my schedule, and go back to my schedule all the way through election day, and it's filling up as time goes on. But if you go backward, for each event, there's a link to YouTube videos for the event. Or you just go directly to YouTube, type in my name, and you'll come up with a dozen or so that I've done already. So you can see what his platform is and how he plans to come at it.
Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I looked into that too. And I guess before I announced on November 1st or November 2nd, one of those days. Before I did that, I had heard rumblings that different people were thinking of running. And one of them was Betsy Summers. So I didn't want to catch Betsy unaware. Betsy was our U.S. Senate candidate. She is the second highest Pennsylvania Libertarian vote getter in the party's history. I think she's number 2 and number 5 in 2 different races. So Betsy rocks. Betsy's great. So I called her up. I said, Betsy, I hear you're running for governor. Yeah, it doesn't look like anybody else wants to do it. I said, oh, Betsy, I was thinking of doing it. Thank God! So she backed off. And I said, well, you know, you still need a lieutenant governor. She's like, oh, you know. And that's pretty good, because I'm in the Philadelphia area. She's up in the Scranton area, so we're kind of far apart. Then I hung up from her, and I called this guy, who was my lieutenant governor candidate in '98 and in 2002. And he did a great job, even though he's not a Toastmaster.
I am.
Are you?
Oh, I wasn't.
Okay, there you go. I take it back. That's why he did a great job.
Yeah.
So I asked him if he wanted to do it, and he said he would make up his mind this month. He wasn't sure.
And I'm still not sure.
Okay, I didn't want to put
Hey,
you
but
in
it's
this.
a hockey night in Pittsburgh and he's here, you know, so.
What you want is somebody far apart. So me in the east, Henry in the west, that's perfect. Betsy up north, well, she can reach around to get State College, Williamsport, the whole northern tier there. I can get Harrisburg, Philadelphia, Allentown. Actually, both of us can get Allentown. It's right in the middle there. And we were discussing Henry, who has the credentials that haven't been twice lieutenant governor candidate, but he could take care of appearances in the west. So that's the thinking right now. If it's me and Henry, then of course that takes care of itself. If it's me and Betsy, maybe Henry can step in on us. We don't know. A lot of it's going to be decided when it comes to the convention, which is why you should be there, February 22nd in Bethlehem. And I'll bet you it's going to be streamed. Because that's one thing with this new administration, in this state party leadership, everything is finally going 21st century. Hallelujah. The last state party board meeting was held on a snowy day. We got about 8 inches of snow. I sat home and I was watching it live, and I was able to participate even though I was 20 miles away. So I don't know. They're the people that I've heard. Going down the line from there, I've identified probably 20, 30 candidates in the various counties who are already thinking of running. Whether or not they're going to follow through. Well, how many, let me ask here, who's thinking they may run for state rep or state senator or something? I said, hello? Who's thinking of running? You should. It's fun. You get to stand up and talk libertarianism. You get to embarrass the other candidates. I just ran for state rep. Well, when I ran for state rep the first time, of course I brought my job description with me. And I asked the Democrat, I said, question came from the audience, about a jobs program. Yeah, I need a jobs program. You do a jobs program for me? Democrats like, yeah, I'll get you a jobs program. Republicans like, yeah, I'll get you a jobs program. And I said, excuse me, but where in here does it say that you can do any jobs program? Can you please show me where? No. Can you? It's fun stuff.